Hi, Mary.
Hi, Lizzie.
Welcome to another episode of today's Anatomy Question. Mary Richards, our esteemed and radiant yoga teacher, anatomy expert, and our partner for Experiential Anatomy, our newest digital course. Go to experientialanatomy.yoga right now, get on the list, and you're going to find out about the launch and all of these videos. You'll get updates from us. So I'm Lizzie Lasater. I'm in San Francisco in front of a fireplace because it's summer and foggy here. And the question today is about, we're going to go there. We're going to talk about the pelvic floor.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, Mary, about Mula Bandha.
Yes.
Which we know as this kind of uplift of the pelvic floor. And the bandhas are often called yogic locks.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to ask, we know that yoga was first, the asana practice was first invented for men. And now 80% of yoga practitioners are women. So is Mula Bandha for women?
I love this question, Lizzie. Okay, so let's start first with basic anatomy of the pelvic floor.
Please.
Okay, and I'm going to focus on female anatomy because the preponderance of yoga students are women, and also the female anatomy is very different from the male anatomy. So the muscle layers are similar. There are 3 muscle layers in the pelvic floor. I did a drawing. Would you like me to show that?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is of the female pelvic floor. And the female pelvic floor has inherently reduced integrity because there are 3 outlets in the pelvic floor. So in the male pelvic floor, you have the anus and then, the urethral opening. Okay. But the female pelvic floor is very different.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
Know that this isn't to scale, and I'm not an artist, okay?
Okay.
So you can see there's the urethra, which is the
Wait, come a little bit closer. It's a little out of focus. Wait, okay. Not too close. Okay, that's perfect. Okay.
So you've got the urethra, which is where urine exits the body. It has a sphincter. You have the vaginal opening, and then you have the anus, which also has a sphincter. Sphincters are their own musculature. You have one at your esophagus as well, controlling the opening to your stomach. Well, we have a urethral and an anal sphincter as well. Okay. Well, surrounding in the most superficial layer, so closest to the outside of the body, surrounding the urethra and the anus is this figure 8 muscle called the bulbospongiosus. Okay, it's what you can touch, if you will, beneath the skin. And you can see how it does look like a figure 8. And then beneath it, the next layer is something called the transverse perineal.
Okay.
And it attaches to your sitting bones. Okay. And the transverse perineal and the bulbospongiosus, they come together and form your perineum.
Right.
Okay, and that's what we typically talk about in Mula Bandha, is that lifting of the perineum.
Okay.
The perineum is the most, it's the strongest part of your pelvic floor. Okay? Well, these muscles are very important, but they're more superficial. The real engine, if you will, the foundation of the pelvic floor and thus of the body is something called the levator ani.
Okay.
So it's very deep.
Okay.
And that muscle, it attaches to your pubic bones, your pubic rami.
Okay.
And your coccyx, your tailbone and your sacrum.
Okay, so how does this relate to when we're doing a pose and we're like bring us back to yoga a little bit.
Okay, so that's the basic anatomy. All right. Now, in certain lineages of yoga, Mula Bandha is instructed as part of asana. Okay, you think Ashtanga, for instance. But in other lineages, for example, the lineage that I practice and train in, which is Iyengar based, you don't practice Mula Bandha and asana. And bandhas are their own practice.
Right.
Okay. So the question for women becomes, have you carried pregnancy to term? Because especially if you've had vaginal birth, there's been profound disruption to the pelvic floor. Not only that, a lot of the education that we receive regarding the pelvis is not based on science. It's based on, let's say, socio-political and cultural perceptions of the pelvis. And so we don't really understand, we're not trained to understand how these muscles work. And so Mula Bandha for women can actually be injurious.
Okay.
Because we don't know as yoga teachers what's happening in the pelvic floor. There's a very specialized branch of physical therapy that deals with pelvic floor disruption. And I think, honestly, the majority of women, approximately 50% of women, experience some sort of pelvic floor disruption in life, whether it's stress incontinence, meaning you laugh, cough, or sneeze and wish you hadn't.
Yeah.
Okay. And so by instructing Mula Bandha in asana, we can actually make things worse. Okay. Not only can a pelvic floor be tight and weak, but it can be loose and weak. Okay. Or there can be both. So a person can be what's called hypertonic, too tight at
some of the muscles,
at the urethral opening, typically, and then be too lax or loose at the vaginal opening or in the anal sphincter, especially if there's been trauma to the pelvic floor. Also, people can break their tailbone. So the tailbone, okay, if we look, you can see the tailbone is oriented anteriorly. Let me see. It curls under. And what can happen is we can fracture this little tailbone like this. And so it may point straight down toward the ground or even be oriented posteriorly.
Right.
And it may never heal properly. A person can have what's called a barn door coccyx. That happens for women in particular who had a baby who was face down.
Right.
Baby's nose got hung on the coccyx.
Right.
Okay, so in my opinion, it's not necessary to instruct Mula Bandha in asana. I personally instruct asana as asana and bandhas as bandhas. And I typically instruct bandhas with pranayama.
Right.
Okay. There is a school of thought that believes engaging the pelvic floor helps support the low back.
Yes, I've heard that argument before.
Okay. So the short answer to that question is yes, the pelvic floor does support your low back. There are literally hundreds of muscles that support your vertebral column. And in particular, the levator ani, that deepest layer of muscle that extends from your pubic bones to your tailbone and sacrum, that works in a balanced body. That works with your transversus abdominis.
Right.
Okay. So in a balanced body, they go together, they fire in harmony, etc. The issue, though, with telling everyone to engage their pelvic floor is you don't know what's going on.
Right.
And most people, in my experience, which is by no means exhaustive, I wish.
Very humble.
In my experience, this instruction to engage the pelvic floor, it just confuses people because they don't even know what a Kegel is.
Right.
You know, we've been taught as women to stop the flow of urine.
Right.
That's like 1/3 of the equation.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
so I do the floor training separately.
Okay.
The way that I work with people, especially with back bends, which are difficult poses, it's difficult energetically because we're opening the belly, we're exposing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't see what's going on behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Muscularly, it's difficult because we tend to be oriented forward.
Mm-hmm.
So I do a lot of foundational work, and I do pelvic floor training with my students and yoga therapy clients, but I don't incorporate it into asana.
Okay, that's really clear. So last question before we wrap up. Could you give us a tiny preview? I know it's a huge topic, but in experiential anatomy, you and Mom talk about the idea that the pelvic floor and the natural curve of the lumbar spine go together. There's this kind of theory, and that when we tuck the tailbone, we compromise. Can you just give us a preview of what we're going to learn more about the relationship between the spine and the pelvic floor?
Absolutely. There's so much I want to say. So tucking the tailbone disrupts the balance in the pelvic floor in such a way that it contributes to destabilizing your lumbar spine.
Okay, say that again in other words in a slower. I think that's exactly it, but say that, unpack that a tiny bit for us.
Okay, so when we tuck the tailbone, what happens is it changes the muscle balance. Remember, you have 3 layers of muscle in your pelvic floor, and they're partners. So one side of the pelvic floor can be tighter than the other. For instance, if you're in Warrior 2, the front, let's say your right leg is in front, you're in the lunge. Well, that side of the pelvic floor is contracting, but the left side of the pelvic floor is lengthening.
Right.
Okay, so there's asymmetry, and there's asymmetry of action in the pelvic floor. And so when we tuck the tailbone, if there's underlying asymmetry, we're going to make it worse. We're going to overload the pelvic floor, and we're going to disengage. We're going to inhibit. If we tuck the tailbone, we actually inhibit the natural activation of the pelvic floor to support the low back and the breath.
The breath reaches all the way down to the pelvic floor.
Yes, there's a diaphragm in the pelvic floor, and if you are interested, you can do this sitting or lying down when you have 90 seconds, and you close your eyes and just get settled into the rhythm of your breath, noticing the sensations of your breath, and drop your awareness into the root of the body, into the pelvic floor. And as you inhale, you'll feel your...
Wait, okay. I'm going to try it.
Okay. Oh, yes. Okay, sit comfortably. Okay, ideally, Lizzie, that means that your hips are higher than your knees.
Okay, let me fold my pillow.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now, what I'd like you to do as well is I'd like you to adjust the flesh of the buttocks toward the fireplace behind you. Okay. So that you can feel the fullness, the circumference of your sitting bones. Okay. And I'd like you, if you're comfortable doing so, close your eyes. And I'd like you to inhale without force or strain And exhale without force or strain. Settling into the rhythm of the breath. Notice the movements of your ribs. Notice the movements of the belly. Take your awareness into the center of the belly and notice the movements of the diaphragm. As you inhale, the diaphragm descends toward the earth. And as you exhale, the diaphragm rises. Take the awareness now deep into the root of the body, traveling down into the pelvic floor. And as you inhale, the pelvic floor moves toward the earth. And as you exhale, the pelvic floor rises toward the sky. And this is exactly what we want. The respiratory diaphragm and the pelvic floor diaphragm in relationship, in harmony with one another. And if you now take your awareness up toward the base of the throat, right between your collarbones, you may notice a similar action occurring at the base of the throat. This is where the operculum, or the lid to the respiratory tract, resides. The three diaphragm of the body in harmony with one another.
Wow.
Yeah, right? And that's one of the healthiest things we can do for our pelvic floor, because don't you feel really connected right now?
Mm-hmm.
And grounded?
Mm-hmm.
And how does your breath capacity feel?
Mm-hmm. Expansive.
Yeah,
Broad.
yeah.
That's, and what I love about that, excuse me, what I love about that is it's a kind of embodied movement literacy. So, and that's what's so brilliant about this course, Experiential Anatomy, is that it's this pairing of the theory and the understanding of the anatomy with then exactly that exercises where we're on the mats in a way and we feel it in our body. Because as yoga teachers, I was at a workshop yesterday. Actually, I was a student at a workshop and Mom was teaching, and I saw another set of students doing a restorative setup in a creative new way. And then I said, oh, wait, I want to try it. Because if I just see it with my eye, I won't remember it. But I had to actually go into the pose for a moment. And then now I'll remember that setup so it was a supported forward bend. And then I will remember that setup next time I teach. So that's what I love about the way you're teaching experiential anatomy, because now that learning about the pelvic floor is now much more in my body after doing that 2 minutes of breathing.
Yes. And when we teach, Lizzie, we're sharing our practice.
Yeah.
And so we want to practice.
Yeah.
And I hear a lot, because I am a more experienced teacher, I hear a lot, well, what should I say?
Yeah.
What cue should I give? And my answer is always practice. Practice, because your body has its own language and that will become evident to you, and you'll know exactly what to say to the individual in front of you when you've embodied the learning.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Mary, for
Oh, my
sharing.
pleasure.
Thank you for watching. I want to send all of our viewers experientialanatomy.yoga. Go there, give us your email. You're going to get more of these videos, and the course, we're filming it next year. The course is coming. Yeah. It's on the way. We're so excited.
Yes, yes.
Tell us, Mary, where can people find more about you? What is your website?
MaryRichardsYoga.com, and I'm on Facebook too. A little yoga goes a long way on
Perfect.
Facebook.
And I'm on Instagram at Lizzie Lasater, Facebook at Lizzie Lasater. Come find us. Big namaste.
Namaste, Lizzie.
Bye.